All right, everyone. Well, we are at September, which is absolutely crazy. We've had so many segments, so many great segments here with Orange Cafe. Thank you so much. Today, we are so excited to have our special guest here. But before we get started, I wanted to just say a couple things. One is this segment is for you guys. So make sure if you have any questions, Senator Newman is here for you to answer those questions. I have some questions lined up, as you all know. I think most of you are very familiar faces, so you kind of know how this works. But definitely feel free, raise your hand. We will get you out on time. We're going to be done by about 9 o'clock, so that is going to happen. So just be cognizant of that as well. And with that, I'll go ahead and get into some introductions. So, although I feel like we know each other now.
I feel like we've had coffee again.
So it's my pleasure to introduce this morning's guest speaker, Senator Josh Newman. California State Senator Josh Newman represents California's 29th Senate District, which covers portions of North and Central Orange County. He currently serves as the chair of the Senate Committee on Education and the Senate Select Committee on Transitioning to a Zero-Emission Energy Future, as well as a member on the Senate Committees for Transportation, Elections and Constitutional Amendments, Energy, Utilities and Communication, Budget and Fiscal Review, and the Select Committee on Hydrogen. He also serves on the State Allocations Board and as the State Senate's ex officio representative to the California Transportation Commission. Prior to his election in 2016, Senator Newman's professional experience included service as an officer in the United States Army, executive-level positions for a series of startups in the internet and mobile technology sectors, and as the founder of an initiative to assist young military veterans in the OC and Greater LA area in their pursuit of rewarding, career-oriented post-service employment. He is a graduate of Yale University with a BA in history. He and his wife reside in Fullerton with their daughter and their 4 weird but lovable rescue chihuahuas.
It's true. It's all true. Quattro chihuahuas.
Senator, welcome. Yeah. We know that you're so busy. Thank you so much for trekking over to have breakfast with us today and talk to all of our members here. We so appreciate you.
Glad to be here. This is like that coffee and comedians with Jerry Seinfeld.
I mean, we could try.
You're like the Jerry Seinfeld.
Oh, no. If you're funny, we could make this a coffee.
I'll try not to try too hard. Yeah.
Well, we've enjoyed getting to know you as a chamber member. I know that you were able to participate in our our May Parade, which was amazing. So thank you for coming out for that. But if you could tell us just real quickly, what drew you to life in politics and government for those who don't know?
Well, so I don't know that I was drawn to it so much as I kind of came back to it. So as you mentioned in that very nice introduction, I served in the military and I got out, and that's what brought me to California. And I wound up as one of my first jobs, I wound up working for first a campaign for mayor of San Francisco and then for the mayor of San Francisco. And at the time, I think I'd always wanted to work in public service, but I wasn't really ready for the reality of politics at age 26, 27.
Right.
And I will admit that I was continually shocked that politics in the real world wasn't like all the books I'd read in college. and I think I kind of burned out on it. And I wound up, life takes you different ways. And so I wound up moving to Southern California. I worked in the entertainment industry for a little while and for tech companies, like you said. And then I came back to it actually through, as you mentioned, in 2012, I got really interested as a veteran in this question about why young vets coming home from these 2 wars were having so much trouble finding decent jobs, right? And so, at the time, there were lots of challenges facing veterans, but the majority coming home were not faced with, kind of issues that would get in the way of full-time employment.
Right.
And yet I had these conversations with employers that say, hey, I'd always hire a veteran. If I can't find them, I talk to veterans. If I can't find a job. So I thought there's got to be a better way to connect talented vets to employers that could use their talents. And through that, if I'm honest, I got very involved in the Orange County veteran advocacy community at the time. A bunch of us helped stand up a group called the Orange County Veterans Military Family Collaborative. Some of you may know about it. And it's all the different organizations working on all the different issues facing vets, and it's still going strong. And I wound up being very involved in the employment side. And through that, I wound up meeting a lot of elected people who came to all the events, like the Veterans Day events, the job fairs. And they always said wonderful things about vets. Thank you for your service. And we've all got used to that. And I'd always buttonhole each one and say, there's got to be a better way to do this. And they'd always say something to the effect like, oh, that's awesome. Let's call my office. We'll get together. Never happened. Right? Never happened. And so, I really probably ran initially in 2016. It was out of my frustration that if we, as kind of a political system, weren't going to do the thing that everybody agreed was necessary, what are the odds you're going to do the harder things? So
Right.
it was actually, there was a night, I think in 2015, when I was griping about something. And I, and my wife said something to the effect of like, if you really want to change things, Josh, our state senator is termed out in 2016, you should run. And she didn't mean it, and she's certainly regretted it thousands of times since. I'm being the naive guy. I said, that's a good idea. And she was like, oh God. And so that's really what brought me to, when you think about politics has a bad name, right? But public service, I think, is eminently honorable, right? And I really believe that. Having served in the military, this, and I think they're sort of, equivalent kinds of service. But when you think about voting, like, we get all caught up in politics. Voting is actually how we as citizens hire the people who work for us in the public sphere. So, my idea in 2016 was like, I want that job. Give me a shot at that job. So I wound up running. Nobody took me very seriously for a long time. I did a bunch of gimmicky stuff, try to get my name out there. And I wound up winning a very close election in 2016.
Very nice. Only because you said gimmicky, and I love ice cream.
One of many.
I have to bring up the ice cream truck at this time. Is that how the ice cream truck came into play? Has everyone seen Senator's ice cream truck?
Oh, really? That's good branding, right? That's good marketing progress, right? So the ice cream truck is like gimmick number 4, right? And so,
okay.
Yeah. And so the original stratagem was, I don't know why I thought it was a good idea. I bought this remote control blimp in 2016, and you're laughing. It's true. It seemed like a good idea, and it's about the size of a minivan, and it said Newman for Senate, and I had this idea, like, I'm going to fly this blimp around, and people are going to look up and like, who's that guy, right? Turns out people don't look up that often. Right, and certainly, batteries were a big deal. And so it went from that, and then I had this idea that if I had a mascot, that I could walk around with my mascot. And so I had this idea, so I got a bear costume. Okay. I don't know if anybody's heard of this. And so bought this college mascot costume. And the idea I thought was to walk around with a guy in a bear costume, and people would want to meet me, and I could collect the information. And so I went out on the first day when I got it. It was really heavy. I wanted to test, make sure I wasn't going to get some kid killed, like, in the heat. Oh, my goodness. And so somehow this sort of myth got started that I walked around in a bear costume, and it was in the paper, like, kooky guy wins election. So, did that. And then, if part of my history, I wound up getting recalled. I'm not sure we're going to talk about it, in 2018, as a result of, we all voted on the gas tax. And so I had this brilliant idea, I thought at the time, those pub bikes where everybody pedals and, go around together and drink beer. So I bought one of those things. I thought it was really smart. Nobody actually wanted to pedal. So that didn't work out so well. So the next iteration, was this ice cream truck idea. It's called Better Senator Ice Cream. It says on the side, you deserve a better senator ice cream sandwich. And we've given out, I think, something close to 200,000 ice cream sandwiches, which we got a good wholesale deal from one of the supermarket chains. And I remember when I told my consultants, like, hey, I'm doing this, they were like, well, that's a lot of money, Josh. And I was like, not compared to the money you guys waste on all the mail that people don't read. Right. So it's been fun, and it actually turned out better than I ever thought. It's a great way to meet people, and talk to people about things that really matter to them. And at a minimum, like, what I've learned is, like, even the reddest kind of Republican who doesn't like a guy like me, they probably won't cuss you out in front of kids, right? So it works out pretty well. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I love that. Yeah, well, thank you so much for bringing it to the May Parade. That's awesome.
Sure, and we had such a great time, and we worried a little bit that we were going to cause a mob scene because people were chasing them, and eventually they told us to stop throwing ice cream sandwiches out. So it's a fun way to actually meet the public. Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing that. Mm-hmm. Okay, getting into something more serious. The North Orange County Public Safety Collaborative. I know that was founded, I think, about 5-6 years ago.
Yes.
Only just a few cities. It's now expanded to about 12 cities, including Orange. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. So one of the things I'm most proud of is I secured funding in 2017 for a program that continues. It's now called the North Orange County Public Safety Collaborative. It was originally called the Task Force. And it's now a 12-city program in North Orange County. It's most of the 13 cities in the North Orange County service provision area. And a bunch of city managers and chiefs of police came to me in 2017 and said, hey, we have an idea about how better to get at, the root causes of homelessness, youth violence, and post-incarceration reentry by creating a framework to better align all these small cities that alone can't solve these problems, but who often are kind of neglected by the bigger systems like state level, county level. So the idea was like, let's create a kind of a unit of management and a framework to see if we can't align public safety across all these cities, but also all the different organizations within each city that are working on some facet of the problem.
Okay.
And it's been really encouraging. So it's now in year 6, and over time we've secured about $40 million of state money. Young Kim and some others have secured some federal money, county money's gone in. But it's a really promising model for both progress locally, but also replication, right? To get this really challenging phenomenon of homelessness, where we have spent literally billions of dollars as a state. We don't have much to show for it. So this, I think, offers promise to that. We actually have Brian Lockery is here. Where are you, Brian? And so, Brian, give Brian a lot of applause. So, Brian, communications has been a wonderful asset for us, telling the story of the collaborative. Yeah.
Got it. Now, as far as who it involves, so you mentioned it's the local police. It involves homelessness, youth. Is it youth?
Right. So there's 3 categories. The major emphasis on homelessness.
Right.
Second is youth violence prevention. Right. So there are cities like Orange, Placentia that you wouldn't know it if you don't go to those neighborhoods, but they still have terrible gang problems.
Right.
And so working on kind of changing that culture. And then the reality is, if you go to prison, you come back. Right. And so we're trying to help, working with some organizations like Project Rebound and others in the area to figure out, what are better, sort of smarter strategies when we bring people back into the community to set them up for success.
Got it. And as far as like any big wins, can you think of a particularly big win you guys might have had since its inception?
So one of the things that the task force has developed, and I can't take credit, I'm just proud to have gotten the money, but the leadership has been over time, the chief of police of Buena Park, then Fullerton, and now the city of Brea, kind of leads the effort. And there's a wonderful woman named Sue Kang, who's the executive director, who kind of herds all the cats, as they say. But among the things that I think the task force has done that are really promising, they have created first did a census of the actual homeless by individual names. So, there's a requirement every year under federal law to do a point-in-time count, as they say. And so it's an aggregate count. It's like how many homeless people are. Nobody really believes the number. It's a statistically solid estimate. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't capture the individual needs. So what they did, we took some of the money, they went out and they did a census of the entire population, and they got anybody who was counted to, I think 80-90% agreed that they could be, give their information, that we could track them, and then developed a mobile application that allows for all of the different service providers to access the same database. So if you meet somebody who's having, challenges with homelessness in Placentia, but they're getting services, say, in Orange or Fullerton, all that's trackable. And then the most recent thing they've done is they've added the ability to actually book beds in shelters through that application. And that actually puts people directly into a shelter, as opposed to the kind of historical model, which is like, hey, there's a bed somewhere, show up at 5 and, in Placentia at the transitional center. Right. And somebody either doesn't show up or they get there and there aren't any more beds. So we're making progress. And so it's a good use of technology. And we've actually, there's a pilot now going on LA Metro, which giant transportation system. They've actually licensed the same platform to try and deal with homelessness on their system because they think it's really promising. Okay.
Well, thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah. Well, don't thank me. Everybody else, Brian knows all. Brian knows all the people who do all the real work. But it's been really encouraging.
Brian, is that something that people can volunteer with, or?
If people want to volunteer, there's volunteer opportunities available, and they partner with nonprofit organizations throughout the whole North Orange County area. So that's why they call it the collaborative.
Oh, that's awesome.
There's a lot of community-based organizations that get support from the collaborative.
Okay.
And work together with the cities, the police departments, and all of that.
Oh, that's amazing.
In those 3 areas.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. So know that you guys can volunteer if you'd like, and those of you out there on Facebook can volunteer as well.
And more importantly, if you know organizations that are working on some facet of this problem, please direct them to the collaborative, because that's really the secret sauce, if you will, is getting everybody together and aligned to help, in this very challenging effort.
Got it.
NOCpublicsafety.com.
OCpublicsafety.com?
NOC Public Safety.
Thank you. As far as advocacy for foster care, foster children, I saw that you and your wife have both volunteered for a long time with CASA, which is court-appointed
Special advocate.
Yeah.
Who said it?
Me.
Very good.
I'm
well
like,
done. Yeah, well done. It's a CASA. Yeah. Were you a CASA?
No.
Oh. Oh, yeah.
Okay. So if you can tell us a bit about CASA and your work with that, and then some of that advocacy you've been doing, that'd be great.
So my wife and I have to give credit to my wife, she dragged me to one of these informational sessions. And there are currently about 90,000 kids in the foster system in California. There aren't nearly enough mentors for those kids, right? So if you're a kid in the foster system, you, on any given day, are just surrounded by bureaucracy. And so there are social workers and the criminal justice system is often involved and everything except for somebody to look out for that child. So this organization, CASA, Court-Appointed Special Advocates, is dedicated toward being the voice of the youth that's in the foster system. And so I went to one of these orientations, and it turns out, there aren't nearly enough volunteers, but there certainly aren't enough men, right, to be matched up with young men in the system. And so she and I both agreed to be CASAs, and so she was matched up with a young woman in Santa Ana. I was with a young man in Buena Park, and spent about 2.5 years being his mentor. And so the way it works is you see the kid every couple of weeks to make sure you know kind of what's going on in their life. But more importantly, you go with them to all of these meetings and court dates, and and speak for them in court, to the social workers, to with the educational system. And help them navigate this very challenging path. The statistics around foster kids are really depressing. Like some very large share of people who are homeless and have other problems were at some point in the foster system. And so the CASA system, for the kids they help, massively helpful. And really, really proud to have done that work. Super useful now being in the legislature. And I look back on that experience, probably the most kind of useful thing that I've done, and sort of, especially I'm on one of the budget subcommittees that has jurisdiction over the courts and a bunch of other things, and homelessness. And to spend a day in juvenile court in Orange County is to see really kind of a tale of two cities. Like we can all live in this really wonderful, prosperous place. There's a whole nother Orange County out there. It is really challenging for the young people that are subject to its pressures. It's really scary. So CASA is the kind of thing where it should be a public program, right? So the same way that we fund public defenders, we should fund, advocates for foster youth. We don't. There was some money in last year's budget that we actually, a bunch of us protected this year in the face of the deficit. But the need is just huge. And so, there should be at least one adult for every kid. And I'd urge anybody here who's interested in making a difference, we can connect you to CASA. CASA Orange County, just the most wonderful, sort of strong leadership, generous people I've ever met, doing really good work for kids.
Okay. Well, then, as you guys hear, another place you guys can get involved with CASA.
So we're going to guilt you all through breakfast
Before
here.
you leave today, you're going to volunteer for something. I'm just kidding. Okay. So Problem Solvers Foundation Caucus. And so that's something else I saw that you were involved with. It looks like this past session you guys were focused on clean energy and homelessness. I see a theme there, which is great. Can you tell us a bit about what you guys worked on this past session?
Sure. So I'm part of a group in the legislature called the Problem Solvers Caucus, and it's modeled after a federal thing called the Problem Solvers Caucus. And what it is it's an effort to get legislators from both parties, but also both houses, the Assembly and the Senate, into a space where we can talk seriously about problems without having to always look at them through a partisan lens. Because in my opinion, that doesn't always lend itself to objectivity and kind of practicality. So there's about 22 members. I'm one of the co-chairs. I've been one of the co-chairs for the first 3 years. And so, we convene, every 2 weeks, we get members together, we talk about different issues. This year, as you mentioned, we worked on homelessness, on some of the public safety stuff as well, and also on clean energy transition. And the whole thesis is that we were sent to Sacramento to solve problems,
right?
Not to play politics. And it's been really, I think, interesting and helpful for me, and I assume for others, that up in Sacramento, you often don't really have a chance to spend time with members of either the other house or the other party.
Right.
And the better you know each other, the more likely you're going to have a good idea that that transcends kind of the normal politics. So that's kind of the model. and really encouraged that we have more members this year than last year.
Nice.
So it shows, I think there is an appetite among my colleagues to kind of get out of this kind of us versus them frame and hopefully think about some things differently.
Yeah, from what I read, it sounded like you guys are really just focused on like what's best for everyone as opposed to sticking on one side.
Yeah, and it is, I mean, honestly, it is not, I mean, it's not that easy to get your typical legislator to do that, right? I mean,
Right.
there's some trepidation even about like I'll come to the meeting, but I don't want anybody to know, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, which says something really telling about the whole thing.
Secret sign-in sheet.
Yeah, totally. Like, would you tell anybody if I came? Or like, yeah, no, I won't. I won't tell anybody you want to solve problems. It's our little secret. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing that work. I think it's a good time to see if anyone has any questions. I'd love to take some questions from you all out here. Anyone have anything you want to bring? Oh, Rachel, thank you.
Good. Senator, thanks again for joining us. Wanted to know your thoughts on some of the new leadership in the legislature coming to us in the new year. So we've got Speaker Designee McGuire, and we already have Assembly Speaker Rivas in place. Your thoughts on kind of this moment of new leadership in the state legislature?
So I don't know how closely folks follow this stuff, but the legislature is like one big student council. And sooner or later somebody graduates and there's a mad rush for their position. So in the assembly, there was a leadership change and it was, kind of fraught with tension, conflict. But Rob Rivas from Salinas is the new speaker and he's sort of getting situated. And so that comes with all the different committee assignments will probably rotate. And then on the Senate side, Senator Toni Atkins, who's been a wonderful pro tem, she's termed out next year. And so, there's now been, or there will be in January, leadership changes. Senator McGuire will become, he's the majority leader now, will become the president pro tempore, the head of the Senate. And so there will probably be a bunch of leadership changes there. I think, on my side of Mike McGuire, he's a solid, very thoughtful guy, very kind of practical, pragmatic guy. So I'm very much looking forward to working with him. And, not really sure what my next assignments will be, but, I think he's got a good group around him. And we are facing some real, headwinds in California with the fiscal environment. So, it's really important that we as a body aren't distracted by other things. So we'll see, but it's encouraging.
Okay. Thank you for that question, Rachel. Did you have a question, Dar? Oh.
I was just waiting.
Saying hello. Okay.
I did way back. Yeah. So we're good. We're good. That's covered. Yeah.
Senator, I'm Gina Cunningham, and I'm the Executive Director of Homes and Help Build a Future Without Homelessness. And I know that homelessness is something that is important for you to speak about. What do you believe is our biggest barrier to meeting the need to get people off the streets?
I kind of believe the biggest barrier is thinking about homelessness as an abstracted problem and not as a combination of many problems. And so we sort of don't see the trees for the forest, if you will. And because of that, we've tried to solve everything kind of at the macro level. And I mean, Lord knows we've spent, billions and billions of dollars over the last decade. We have very little show for it. So, to my mind, I'm kind of an incrementalist at heart. You have to break the problem down into its subcomponents. And so homelessness is not a thing, it's a kind of an aggregation of a series of problems, right? So there's economic displacement, substance abuse, mental health, a whole bunch of, post-incarceration challenges, the foster system. And we have to look and isolate those things and then learn. And this is why I'm so proud of the work that the collaborative is doing. They're doing that, right? They're doing that, I think, in a smart, kind of thoughtful, methodical way. And if we can then replicate, Brian and I were talking about earlier, so the next step is to replicate this model in other parts of the state and see if we can, A, be smart about it, but also B, collect information and track and learn what works as opposed to, these kind of broad brush things where somebody one year says, oh, we've got a new grand scheme. That tends not to work very well. And so, it's all of these different subcomponents. You're going to solve the problem by breaking it apart. And then what we can do best over time is understand what the realities of those problems are and then hopefully prevent people from falling into those different buckets. And frankly, we haven't done that as a state government. We certainly haven't done that at the county level in ways that work so far. And so one of the biggest challenges is aligning, all these different levels of government to work together. And money's not really the problem, right? Money is a means to an end. It's coordination. And I think having a clarity of vision that's necessary to do that.
Thank you, Gina. Anyone else? Okay. Oh, did I miss?
Yeah, I thank you, Senator, for what you do. And I'm the oldest person here by a lot.
I don't know about it by a lot. You're probably not even the oldest person here, but go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I've seen tremendous changes over the years. And to me, your job has become more and more complex over the years because most of these things used to be solved within the community. Foster care for one of them. One of my grandparents took in a lady, and we've always called her aunt. Technically, not an aunt. Took her in. And homelessness, we had tramps on the railroad, and my mother would give them sandwiches or other things. But now everything is so complex, and I know 5 people that are homeless by choice. They do not want to follow rules. Their parents would take them in. The home is there if they will follow simple rules. And so there's many categories on these things that just didn't exist before.
I think that's true. And so one of the recent developments legislatively is the creation of something called the care courts. And that's to provide a legal and resource basis for intervention, for, I think, some of the folks that you've described, who might have severe challenges, but who have been granted kind of the liberties to stay out on the streets. And because of, changes in systems, but also changes in law, we don't have the sensibility or the tools that we had, say, 30 years ago when we had mental health institutions and there was a higher tolerance for conservatorships and interventions. So we needed the tools, especially for those kind of severely mentally ill people who are on the streets and are often a danger to themselves more than anybody else, but for whom the law has not really evolved for us to give them kind of compassionate care through intervention. So we're trying to do that, but I will say, if you've talked to homeless people, especially here, it's hard not to realize over time that often nobody wants to be homeless, right? People sort of fall through different holes in the safety net, but each time they've asked for help somewhere. They've asked for help from friends. They've asked for help from local government, from whoever. And quite often their experience has been really negative, that they've actually felt not only not helped, but humiliated. And we all have pride, right? And so, you can see where somebody having sort of fallen through all those gaps might get to a point where they're like, the hell with it. I have my people here. I have my pride, my self-respect. I'm not doing that. So part of the challenge for us is actually providing them with enough by way of resources, but also the confidence that we're actually looking to help solve their problems. Because nobody wants to be homeless, right? So, ask the question, like, why would somebody want to live in an encampment? And quite often it's because, there's the mental illness part, but it's also because they've had such a terrible experience with all the government services that they try to access. And so I think we have to be honest about that and figure out better ways to do it.
Thank you. One question I have for you is, or one last question, would you mind sharing a little bit about your legislative priorities for this coming year?
Certainly. So I'm the current chair of the Senate Committee on Education, and I think everybody here would agree that nothing is more important than the quality of education we give to our young people. But it's also equally important that we try to figure out ways to reduce all the challenges at the higher education level, by way of student debt, access to quality, to spots in the UC and the CSU systems. So we're going to work on that. I think homelessness remains, one of our, kind of the crisis of our era.
Right.
As you mentioned earlier, I've been very involved in sort of this question about how do we transition California to a greener economy. My thesis is that, we have to do this, but there's nothing about that that should come at the expense of taxpayers, right? Businesses, the local economy. We should be able to do these in ways that are sort of mutually beneficial. So I've been sort of a practical voice in those conversations. And then last, I think is the housing crisis, right? We have, just a massive challenge in California producing enough housing that, there's affordable housing in and around the state. So, we're millions of units behind what we think we need, so that the supply and demand curves are such that, anybody here with kids Orange is a good example. You know, if you're a young person looking to stay here and buy something in California, it's, you know, really daunting. And that is, I think, really problematic for a bunch of reasons, right? You know, out migration is a real thing. Right? If you can go have similar job in a place that has lower cost of living, like, you know, you're probably going to do it, but that's at the expense of family bonds and a whole bunch of other things. But it's also true that we don't want to become a state of renters, because that comes with a whole set of challenges, including political challenges. So when we vote on propositions, and the propositions about, for instance, raising property taxes, you know, I get really concerned that you know, somebody who does not have a stake in that business might be making decisions that cost people who do meaningful amounts of money. That creates a bunch of friction within the system that's really hard to resolve. So the best thing we can do is try and figure, like, how can we create more affordable housing? No simple thing. That involves you know, a bunch of legislation to change kind of zoning regimes, but also, you know, sort of the raw costs of housing through CEQA and a bunch of other things. It's so hard before you even, you know, nail a couple of sticks together. Housing's already, the land development costs are so expensive in California that it's hard for anybody to afford. Sure. So those are my priorities moving forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mostly here we have our business community. So the Orange Chamber has made up a lot of our business community, some of our regular community as well. What can we do to help further those causes with you?
So, you know, I think in many cases the business community is doing a good job. So we voted recently. Actually, let me caveat that. We voted recently on a bunch of you know, constitutional amendments that will come to the voters as propositions. I think the voice of business was heard, not sufficiently to stop those two, you know, ACA 1 and ACA 13, which will be on the ballot. One will change the threshold for raising taxes, which I did not vote for. And the other, you know, will put on the ballot, you know, a proposition that says if you're going to raise taxes, you know, that the threshold for changing the Constitution has to be the same as the threshold you're asking for. But, you know, it's really important that your voice as business be heard, especially in those committees that make decisions that, you know, either put things on the ballot or raise your, you know, taxes or affect your businesses generally. You know, so again, like, I'm a Democrat, but I'm, you know, about as pragmatic as anybody I know. And I really am concerned about California's business climate and its impacts all the way through the system. You know, not just now, but moving forward, especially when we're in a sort of a quasi-recessionary situation like we are now. Want to make sure that, you know, this state, which is so wonderful, you know, it's also very challenged. And our inclination often is to, you know, keep going to the well of high net worth individuals and businesses to fund government. That is not sustainable over the long haul. So, you know, I'm glad to be an advocate for moderation in that regard.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for becoming a member of the Chamber. We appreciate that.
Thank you for having me.
Spending your free time with us.
All right. Gotta have breakfast. This is awesome. Yeah.
All right. Does anyone have a last question before we head into some events and announcements? Yes, go ahead.
So, a couple of bills passed regarding colleges and schools stocking the antidote for fentanyl overdose. Are there any conversations, well, first and foremost, thank you for your military service and for your legislative service. Are there conversations happening on what kind of laws can be passed to get ahead of the fentanyl crisis, in addition to these laws which are really reacting to it like after the fact?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there are certainly conversations. So there are conversations. There are also lots of programs in the state that are plenty well funded to make progress on that. And so, you know, we as legislators really have three primary functions, right? So we do constituent service, you know, for our constituents. You know, you can't get your unemployment, we help there. We do legislation. You know, you can argue we do too much legislation sometimes. And then the thing that we're supposed to do, which we don't do well enough, is oversight. And I think through oversight, we should be making sure that, you know, that the state agencies and local agencies that are actually working on these problems, you know, are properly resourced, but also, you know, are being held accountable. And so the fentanyl crisis is, you know, sort of a nexus of lots of different things. It's not easy to legislate out, right? You know, so you know, there really controversial bills about, you know, raising the penalties. Senator Umberg had one of the bills, you know, says if you knowingly give fentanyl to somebody and you cause a death, I mean, you should be held accountable. But there is this question of, like, does that provide enough deterrence to kind of shift, the equation. It probably doesn't. It's probably justifiable. We should be figuring out how do we change all of these sort of modes that lead people into drug use, that make drug use so accessible, especially to those who are most vulnerable, like the homeless, like children. And that's no simple thing, but I think it's a necessary conversation because no single piece of legislation can solve those problems.
Awesome.
And on that depressing note, thanks for having me. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Michelle, that's great. I also heard, I just have to bring this up because I asked, Michelle and I talked about this yesterday. I heard that if like someone were to, I guess we were able to auction off, let's say, your ice cream truck at an event, that we could also have margaritas.
That is true. That is true. So in our latest like redo of the truck, it's like that Pimp My Ride things. We
Yes.
just had some work done on the truck. So we added one of those like slushy margarita things. So yeah. So if it's a charitable organization, especially, I'm glad to
Elizabeth?
bring it along. Glad to bring it along. And as long as it's on private property, we'll put alcohol in the slushies. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Dave, you can hang for just 1 second. I'd love to go over a couple events with everybody.
Thanks for having me. Sure.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a lot coming up. First and foremost, we have State of the City coming up. That's going to be on October 6th, starting at 2 p.m. at Chapman's Musco Centers. I hope. Who's planning to go? Everyone? Okay, good. Dara?
Pretty slow on that hand, right? Yeah.
I was just joking with you. So please get your tickets if you have not already. It's going to be a great session as always, and then followed by a reception out on that beautiful lawn. So plan to get your tickets today. B&G, that's our business networking group. We have that on the first and third Wednesdays. The next meeting is October 4th at Zito's Pizza. We have a mixer coming up this Thursday. That's going to be at Calaveras in Orange. So please register and plan to attend that. So much fun. Ribbon cuttings. And so Elizabeth's going to help me with this first one. So we have a ribbon cutting on this Friday at 5 p.m. at Old Town Film Festival. But there's more. So Elizabeth, you can tell us about the more of that.
Yes, that is a whole weekend of films. It's the first time we've had a film festival in Orange. It's going to be at the American Legion Outpost there on, I think, what's the street? Lemon. Thank you, on Lemon. The ribbon cutting starts at 5. It's also going to be a mixer. There'll be a band, music, food, and there's a red carpet to walk. And if you're a chamber member and you attend, you may go into the first movie for free immediately after the mixer. So it's going to be a wonderful weekend, all the way through Sunday with an award ceremony Sunday afternoon.
Perfect.
Can you tell us some of the judges are? Some of the judges. Let's see. Some of the judges, I believe, Mayor Slater is one of the judges. Jack Carlisle is one of the judges. Let's see, who else?
Elizabeth is one of the judges.
I was one of the judges. I had the flu last week and I watched all 11 of my films and very impressed. So please come out. It'll be a really fun event.
Yes, and so you can always find all that information on our social media, also the Chamber's website, orangechamber.com. We have another ribbon cutting on October 10th. That's at Force 3 Fitness, and that's over on the east side. Very nice facility. I tried to break in the other day and see what was inside. You guys have to come out to that. We have our art walk coming up. That is going to be on Saturday, October 14th. Our next Eggs and Issues is going to be on the 24th, and that's going to be with California State Assembly member Avelina Valencia. That will be at Citrus City Grill. So for those of you who were there before, we're going to be back in downtown at Citrus City. They put on a great spread as well. I also want to say thank you so much to Orange Cafe Bistro. Please let's give them a round. They are not open on Tuesdays, so their staff and their owner come in just for us. They put on a great breakfast. So those of you who are out watching and haven't been here for breakfast, please get over here for breakfast, but not on Tuesday morning. Any other day but Tuesday morning. Make sure to follow us on social media. That's where you can find everything out. Also, a huge thank you to our Chairman Circle sponsors, our board, our staff, and our members. And thank you all for coming out today. We will see you next month.
Well done. Thank you for having me. Thank you. All right. That was fun. Thanks, Berkenda.